In the modern era of pro wrestling, there were numerous programs competing head-to-head. The companies obviously care about the actual numbers, but usually it very quickly turns into a personal ego trip. The current Wednesday Night Tours is by far the lowest profile competition in modern history as it caters to a niche, very limited audience. We're looking at the individual players who made a difference along with the formatting of the show. Let's take a look at the numbers. We start with the overall numbers for October. Dynamite opened with a relatively strong audience for the first show. That quickly changed as they presented the big audience who sampled it with a niche, out-of-touch product designed for a minority of people who are already watching. To no surprise, in just a few weeks, they were also the only people left watching. Pro wrestling at its best was about how the wrestling match develops or ends the story. With segments, promos, skits, delivered by charismatic, physically impressive alpha males. Dynamite offered none of that. Individually, we are looking at the most promoted performers, for the simple reason that their segments are usually advertised in order to keep or grow the audience. Chris Jericho was the biggest difference maker on Dynamite, increasing way above average for his promoted segments or preventing a bigger loss of people. Jon Moxley was the most consistent performer, growing the audience in every segment. The rest were a non-factor. On NXT, everyone was hit and miss. You can't make a realistic conclusion, yet. In November, WWE used main roster talent in order to compete with the more established names on Dynamite. Mainly Chris Jericho, as he, along with Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone, are the biggest names in the promotion by a wide margin. This led to NXT winning some weeks, and Dynamite continuing to sink with additional, stronger sports competition on television. Dynamite continues to present an unappealing product to the masses. With the historically failed formula of cold, random wrestling matches with no star power, dominating the shows and losing viewers throughout. In addition to that, the formatting of the show was mostly amateurish, including the company's biggest star, and best performer, Jericho, talking for 2 minutes on mute, in a backstage segment during commercial while they showed in full, 2 way too long, audience-dropping matches, before and after. In November, Chris Jericho completely separated himself and his drawing power, turning into the only legit, audience-pulling performer on the 2 shows. While this should come as no surprise, as Jericho is the biggest name by a huge margin. It only took several weeks because Dynamite's producers showed a lack of understanding in how to maximize television patterns. Not capitalizing on the usual turnover of the casual viewer during the top-of-the-hour segment. Cody Rhodes was doing decent when he was on screen with Jericho, but other than that, showed no individual growth. Kenny Omega usually doesn't mean a lot as he's mostly a miss, more dependent on the opponent. The Young Bucks are presented as major stars, but it's clear the audience doesn't buy them as players. They're currently the most negative advertised performers on Dynamite. Jon Moxley continues his consistency as the second biggest draw on the show. For NXT, AJ Styles and Becky Lynch made some difference individually. But the biggest difference maker was Hunter inviting the 2 main rosters to come to the show in front of the bigger audience on Monday night. Other than that, no individual really means anything. Lessons from the clear pattern of the show weren't learned in Dynamite. The story was the same in December, decreasing audience. NXT was able to retain some viewers from the mega push they got on the main rosters leading up to Survivor Series. But it's more of the case of Dynamite going down than NXT catching up. The reason for that is simple: not one performer on NXT is a consistent difference maker. Nobody really means anything. NXT also gets an artificial bump in numbers for the unopposed overrun, which make the overall number look better than it is. Mysteriously, Dynamite still didn't counter it. Eric popularized this strategy in 96-97, and Vince countered in 98. Dynamite's main performers, positive and negative, remained the same in December. Awards for the standout performers. The prestigious, ratings killer award goes to Dynamite, the Young Bucks. NXT, Matt Riddle. The boxers are working extremely hard in the ring, but in terms of believability, when you physically look the way they look, and work the way they work, you can only go so far beyond the niche audience. Riddle just seemed to do even worse than the average, non-difference makers on the show. The ratings winner awards goes to Dynamite, Chris Jericho. NXT, nobody. Chris Jericho is basically a one-man show, completely carrying Dynamite, creatively and in numbers. In this Wednesday night environment, he looks like an all-time pro, playing with amateurs. Not a single performer on NXT made a difference. The closest is bringing main roster names, historically great wrestling programs, grow the audience throughout the show and peaking at the main event segment. The Wednesday night programs show the complete opposite, peaking at the start and dropping all the way, failing to keep viewers engaged. NXT is basically a developmental territory on TV. No creative angles and star quality. It's OVW and FCW, just with far less potential on the performers, as there's not a single standout, star-making performer, with the look, charisma and talent to make a difference. Dynamite had a great opportunity to make an impact. They got great promotion from a big network. Instead of presenting a mainstream, appealing to the masses show, they presented an indie show with a TV deal. Management, instead of listening to success and experience, are booking a show for people like Meltzer, who are completely out of touch of what a good wrestling television show is. Historically, never got it. You don't really have a chance of increasing and attracting an audience when the bulk of the show is a bunch of wrestling matches that don't mean anything, performed by people that nobody knows. The success of the wrestling industry will always depend on character development, and charismatic, physically impressive athletes. Something that unfortunately, you can't find on Wednesday night. And for that matter, any night, in the state of the industry. See you next year.